And if you only can do one of the changes that we mentioned today, and you can stick with this for the rest of your life, that is real change. If you feel stuck on your health journey, or if you follow too many misinformation type of black and white channels here, or if you simply just want to know how to start to improving your health through your diet, this video is for you. This video is structured in 3 sections. In the first section, we talk about the many factors that actually impact your health. One of them is your diet. And in the second section, we will talk about 5 changes, which, if you're consistent, every single one of them alone are pretty big ticket items. And then at the end, we will ask the question, what does it actually mean for you? And as always, all the resources that I used to make this video are in the description. My name is Doc Mark, and you're watching On The Beat. So let's first talk about the factors that impact your health. I think what a lot of people get wrong about health is that there are quite a lot of things that actually affect our health. And not all of them are in our control. Roughly, we can categorize those factors into 3 big buckets, right? So the first one is our genetics. The second bucket would be the health management, right? So how do you actually manage your specific health condition? The third one would be our environment, the things that we're being exposed to. So let's first talk about genetics. Genetics often are large precursors for disease conditions such as diabetes or cancer, for example. It's like genetics also determine how effectively you can lose visceral fat in certain regions and how well you build muscles and other things. So it doesn't mean that you are all set and done with your genetics, but what you have to understand is that you can only operate within the parameters that your genes give you, right? And type 2 diabetes is probably a great example for that. There are multiple genes that we believe to play a role in the disease development of type 2 diabetes. So if you have those specific forms of those genes, then you are at higher risk to develop type 2 diabetes. That doesn't mean that you have to develop the disease, right? But what it means is that the other 2 categories, the other 2 buckets we're talking about, they will become a lot more important. What's in the second bucket? Our health management bucket. So that is something that is actually in your control for the most part, right? And we're talking a whole range of actions that you can take. The general question here would be, how do you take care of yourself? We're talking weight management, exercise. We're also talking medical treatments like vaccinations, cancer screenings, annual checkups. We're talking safer sex, and we're talking risk factors. Drinking, smoking, the use of PEDs, right, or recreational drugs. Those are all risk factors. We can potentially also involve the consumption of nutritional supplements or even sometimes the consumption of certain foods, really depending on what your health conditions is. Our food and our diet would largely go into the third category, which is our environment. Those are the things that we are being exposed to on the inside and the outside. So that includes toxins in the environment, like we talked about in other videos, like mycotoxins is a good example in food, right? But also in water and air, in the workplace. And it includes stress, like heat stress, cold injuries, but also stress at work, mental, physiological stress levels. And of course, it includes your diet. Because we eat regularly and we eat multiple times every day throughout our entire life, our diet can have a very large impact on our overall health and well-being. And that is what we're talking about today. Now let's talk about the nutritional changes that you can make in your diet that would make a positive impact on your health. And the first change I want to recommend is the increase of dietary fiber and plant material in your food. The one thing that has been shown over and over again in science is that a diet rich in fiber and rich in plant material has positive impacts on heart and cardiovascular conditions. So now, I don't say you shouldn't eat meat, right? I'm a big proponent of a balanced diet approach, and that includes animal products. When I talk plants, I mean whole foods or only slightly processed foods, like canned beans, for example. This is a pretty big group of foods we talk about. So I want to break this up in a couple of more bits and pieces. So nuts and seeds, for example, are super healthy. They have tons of essential fats, fiber and antioxidants and bioactive compounds. Nuts also have many calories, so you need to be careful with the portions. A handful of nuts is typically good enough per day. Fruit should be consumed regularly. And you just pick the ones that you like. Try to diversify. Vegetables are the other unsung hero of nutrition and health. Brassica species like kale, broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts. Tons of phytonutrients and even some protein and tons of fiber. Pumpkins is a high-fiber superfood with very little calories. We have vitamin-rich zucchini, tomatoes, and peppers. We have garlics and onions with their really healthy sulfur groups. And of course, we have beans and chickpeas and lentils with tons of fibers and tons of protein. And plants are often high volume, low calorie, fiber nutrient rich. They promote heart health. They're great for cancer prevention, and they're even perfect tools for weight loss. I, for example, love blueberries, muscadines, pears, oranges, bananas, kales, Chinese cabbage, bok choy, ginger, spinach, eggplants, pumpkins, and carrots. You don't have to like all of those. You actually have to like none of those. because that's what I chose to eat. And you need to find your plans that you like to eat and then stick with it. I promise, if you start doing this today, in a year from now, you will feel like a much different person just by eating more plants and fiber. So the second category we want to talk about is on the other side of the spectrum, and those are processed meats. Most Americans overconsume on those. I'm talking the sausages, the burgers, the lunch meats, the ready-made foods. There's a large body of knowledge of decades of science linking the overconsumption of those meats to increased cancer risks, higher LDL levels, and higher risk of heart and cardiovascular diseases. Again, I'm not engaging in food fear. I'm not saying this is black and white. I'm talking overconsumption, not the occasional indulgence, right? I eat sausages every once in a while and I love burgers, right? But not on a regular basis. By just eating less processed meats and instead opting to more whole food cuts of leaner meats, tofu, fish, seafood, and other protein sources, that alone will make a positive impact on your health. Number 3, sugars. So the issue of sugars is a lot more complex than it is communicated on many social media outlets, right? Some here lump all carbohydrates into the bad category, like blaming them to increase insulin resistance and lead to diabetes and fatty liver. That is just not true. It's not a black and white issue, and it's not a bad or good issue. The key to healthy carbohydrate consumption are carbohydrate-rich foods, whole foods, or little processed foods, where the sugars are not broken up from the longer complex chain sugars, right? And they're embedded in a fiber matrix. Those foods actually make sure that your blood sugar doesn't spike. So we're talking carbohydrate-rich foods, low-processed grains, steel-cut oats, or vegetables, tubers. So those foods are also often spiked with a ton of bioactive compounds like vitamins, antioxidants, and they're actually extremely healthy. But the more processed your carbohydrate foods is, and the shorter those sugar chains become, and the less fiber matrix is there to embed your sugar, the quicker your sugar is available, of course, right? At the end of that spectrum, you have foods that are spiked with refined sugars or high fructose corn syrup. And the overconsumption of those foods are linked to those diseases like we talked about, fatty liver disease, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, hypertension. So reducing your intake of those highly processed carbohydrates, pastas and the white breads, the noodles, the white rice, the chocolate bars, some of the cereals, ice cream, pastries, cakes, and rely more on whole foods as carbohydrate sources. If you can do that, you will live a healthier life. Next category is protein. Most Americans don't eat enough proteins. They eat too many carbohydrates, too much fat, right? And not enough protein. And a great protein-rich diet would have somewhere around 0.8 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. So if you're a 185-pound man, like I am, that accumulates to roughly 150 grams of protein per day. So 1 gram of protein has 4 kilocalories, which means, in other words, you would eat around 600 kilocalories per day coming from protein. So at a hypothetical maintenance level of 2,000 to 2,200 kilocalories per day, that's about 35 to 27% of your daily caloric intake should come from protein. So now, that number can be a little lower, a little higher, depending on who you are and what your goals are, and etc. But most Americans hover more on the 20%, if not less, kind of level of caloric intake from protein. The majority of the calories on a typical American diet is between 40 to 50% from fat, and then the other 40 to 50% are coming from carbohydrates. So incorporating protein into every meal by using eggs and egg white, leaner meat like 100 grams of chicken breast has 31 grams of protein, right? Tofu is a great protein source. Beans, fish like tuna, for example. And by using even protein powders, you can easily get to better levels of protein. Now, the last one I want to talk about has nothing to do necessarily with your nutrition, but more like how we eat. And that's a more controversial topic as well. And it really depends a lot on your own personal preferences. Some people are completely healthy and fine eating only 2 times a day. And I don't want to discourage this if it works for you. But what I want to say is that for most people, going much lower than that is not optimal. There's some research that suggests that if you do not fuel your body early on in the day, that can lead to health problems later on, right? And here I want to just give you like what is mostly suggested in science. And that is about 4 to 5 meals per day, right? Like smaller portions, whole foods focused, higher in protein, fiber rich, around 20 to 30% fats. And for most Americans, that means to reduce the portion sizes, especially for lunch and dinner, and to eat healthier snacks in the meantime. And I'm talking fruit and vegetables, for example, boiled eggs as snacks instead of candy bars and sugary drinks, right? So if you can do that, if you can reduce your portion sizes and swap out your unhealthy snacks for healthier snacks, that itself will help on your health journey. What does it all mean for you? So I know there's a lot to think about, right? And one thing is that you always need to understand that a diet and a nutrition approach is always highly personalized. The key message that I want everyone to take away from this today is you need to understand your food and your diet in the context of your overall health and who you are, right? Many channels here on YouTube communicate food as a black and white, good or bad type of situation. There are foods that are good for you, there are foods that are bad for you, right? It's so much more complex than those statements. Eating healthier can start with very small, achievable steps. And the key to those changes is consistency. And if you only can do one of the changes that we mentioned today, and you can stick with this for the rest of your life, that is real change. And don't let anyone else tell you different. You did more than most people, and that's not a small feast. And no matter which one of the changes you will pick, the benefits will be well worth it. Like you will have more energy, better mood, and reduced risk of chronic diseases. Please consider to order my book. We're putting out our early bird pre-order list pretty soon, and bits and pieces of the book will be available to look online. We have tables in there, we have graphics in there, we even have a recipe section. And then, last but not least, I also wanted to say thank you again for everyone who is subscribing to my channel. It has been quite a journey for me, literally like the last half year. Every day I'm learning, and my content hopefully gets also better and better. So thanks for sticking with me and my content. I really hope this helped today. And of course, if you haven't yet, please subscribe to my channel. It means the world to me. And I see you soon. I'm out.